all the stakeholders involved, whereas on the other side, what we see is a different perspective. Some others who believe that China is now the new East India Company, and that CPEC is not going to bring any benefits to Pakistan economy. What I'll try to do with this presentation, I think that we need to provide a bit more of a nuanced understanding of what CPEC is, what CPEC entails. And I will sort of articulate my presentation around three main points. So let's try to understand what CPEC is, how it is unfolding on the ground, what are the implications for Pakistan's economic ties with the region. And I will try to look also towards the end at some of the major challenges that CPEC poses. So, I mean, CPEC is the flagship project of the new economic and political architecture envisaged by Beijing through the Belt and Road Initiative. Essentially, a success on CPEC would ensure that would showcase to the world the feasibility of China's plan, as well as demonstrate the tangible benefits deriving from being in China's camp. What's important I think, to stress is that while the name suggests that the countries are establishing a trade and transportation corridor, and partially this has been also framed as such, as a sort of corridor linking Gwadar in Pakistan's Balochistan to Kashgar in Xinjiang, I think it's, I mean, CPEC is best understood through the lens of an investment package. There are reasons to believe that the transit elements of the corridor are going to be relatively modest. As Sweta was mentioning in her introduction, the Karakoram Highway, it's not particularly suitable for heavy traffic, and it's closed intermittently due to landslides. But I think it's probably the most interesting and important case against the transit elements of the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor is an article which was published by an analyst in China's Ministry of Commerce that was very straightforward in outlining the limitations, saying that, for instance, the port of Gwadar as a hub has very little links to China's energy imports, and the author was also very skeptical about the oil pipeline, which it's probably going to be built between Gwadar and Kashgar. So again, CPEC is best understood through the lens of an investment package where the energy sector has the lion's share. We always have to bear in mind that CPEC was announced in 2015 under the government of Nawaz Sharif, and Nawaz Sharif and the PMLN were elected on the grounds that they were able to resolve the energy crisis which was affecting the country. So this is something which we need to bear in mind. So energy projects have the lion's share, and whereas infrastructure in terms of road and rail have are still important, but not as important as the energy dimension. So, as I said, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor was officially announced, and it's probably the latest formulation, but it actually dates back. The first time that Pakistan offered China the opportunity to be used as a corridor was under General Pervez Musharraf in 2004. Then repeatedly there was this offer to the Chinese to sort of invest in the country, and it has been a long-standing desire. It was finally announced in April 2015 during Xi Jinping's visit to Pakistan, and I think some figures would help outline the magnitude of the interactions coming under CPEC. So it was initially announced for $46 billion, revised up to 51 in September 2016, and now we are looking at roughly $61 billion again in September 2017. These are pretty much the exact figures. What I think it's more interesting to highlight is the fact that according to China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we are looking at roughly 14 billion of projects. So there's quite a big difference between what's announced in the headlines and what's actually happening on the ground. But still, 14 billion, it's a very important sum. It's a very good number in this sense. And although there was deep skepticism both in Pakistan and abroad, about the projects coming under the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor since when it was announced. What I think it's very important to emphasize is that the early harvest projects which are coming under CPEC, so the ones which are going to be completed by the end of 2018, are actually materializing on the ground. And this might not come as a surprise to many, but for those who have been studying and following Pakistan-China relations for a while, this marks an important element of this continuity with the past, where if you think about the port of Gwadar in Pakistan, it was initially built in 2001. It started, then the first phase finished in 2006. It started operating 2014, 2015. So if you think about 15 years of this project, and if you think about what's going on now, with 1/3 of the energy-related CPEC projects which are operational, and the other 2/3 which are going to be operational by 2018, 2021, I think this gives us an idea of the political will and the commitment on both sides to develop and to make CPEC a success story. So this is the second main point, which marks, again, a discontinuity with what we've seen before. Things are actually going on, and things are actually happening on the ground. The third broad point that I would like to emphasize is the fact that we're probably seeing a reorientation of Pakistan economic and foreign policy. These are the very early stages, probably, and this is something which is ongoing. But for instance, if we take as a case study, as an example, the relationship between Pakistan and Iran, they've recently finalized the draft of a free trade agreement between the two countries. It was finalized in November 2017. And there was an article recently published in the Express Tribune by the Iranian ambassador to Pakistan, which was essentially saying that Chabahar, where India has invested, and Gwadar are actually sister ports. They're not one against each other. They're not in competition. So Iran and Pakistan have a long-standing tradition of, suspicions and rivalry to a certain extent, and untapped potential of trade. But this is somehow changing after 2014, 2015. So this is an important development which coincides with the announcement of CPEC. I think another very interesting element to notice is the fact that a sort of reapproachment between Pakistan and Russia. This is something that we've seen started slowly in 2011, but we see for instance, 5 days ago, the Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov was in New Delhi for a trilateral meeting with the Foreign Minister of India, with the Foreign Minister of China and India. And he said in New Delhi that New Delhi should not let political problems deter it from joining the project, referring to the Belt and Road Initiative, involving billions of dollars of investment and benefiting from it. So I think this is a very bold statement, if you think about it, from a Russian foreign minister in India saying, well, probably it would be wise to think about and consider joining the Belt and Road Initiative. So I think this is something that it's actually happening and it's going on the ground. So of course, I've tried to portray a sort of rather more positive picture about CPEC, but this is not to say that there are not challenges to what CPEC is and what it entails. So, first of all, there are transparency concerns. The long-term plan, the only way it was made available was through a leak to the Pakistani newspaper Dawn. It was leaked in, I believe it was April. The Minister for Planning and Development, which is also now the Minister of Interior, Azan Iqbal, has said that the long-term plan would be made available on Monday, this Monday. Let's wait and see. It's probably going to be a watered-down version of the one that we've seen published in the press, but still, I think this is an important element because it had a lot of details regarding the main areas of development of CPEC. For instance, in that there was an interesting point about agriculture and how agriculture would also benefit not only Pakistan but also Xinjiang. There was an interesting element about the fiber optic connectivity, which I think it's also very important to understand the evolution of CPEC. So for instance, the idea would be to route through China Pakistani internet traffic with all the implications that come with it. If you think about China's model of internet regulation, which might put at risk freedom of access to information and, you know, all the consequences that this might have. Still is on paper, it's not the official version. Let's see if on Monday this is released. It would be extremely interesting to follow. The second element, the financing of the project, I think it's very, in 2015, the governor of the State Bank of Pakistan mentioned that he didn't know the exact terms on which these projects were financed. There was an article published, I think it was yesterday or 2 days ago, in the Express Tribune mentioning that roughly 65% of the projects coming under CPEC are going to be at roughly a 7% interest rate. So instead of looking at $28 billion of repaying the loans, we will be probably looking at around 40 billion, but still, details have not been disclosed, so it's very difficult to find the exact figures about this. So again, it's a sort of also a transparency concern to a certain extent. And we've seen also center-periphery tensions within Pakistan. Baluchistan, KPK, and Sindh have been very vocal in expressing their concern regarding Punjab benefiting disproportionately from the China-Pakistan economic corridor. A vast part of the projects and of the industrial parks and free trade zones are probably going to be based in Punjab. One of the main results of the recent 7 JCC meeting was exactly that one of the special economic zones, sorry, not the free trade zone, special economic zone was going to be established in Punjab. So these concerns have been raised. To be fair, it's also important to acknowledge the fact that the Joint Cooperation Committee, which is, as I said, the main coordination body between China and Pakistan, involves representatives from the provinces. It would be interesting to understand the exact extent of the input that these representatives have, but still, it's an important element to understand that they've been included into this important decision-making body, in the most important decision-making body of CPEC. And in terms of financing, I think it was recently in the news that China has bought the Hambantota port in Sri Lanka because Sri Lanka wasn't able to repay its debt, and so it was essentially sold to China. May this be a warning sign for Pakistan? That's something which I think we would probably debate throughout today's event, but I think it's important also to mention that, you know, I mean, this CPEC, it's something which it's actually happening on the ground, and it's probably going to define the political and economic dimension of Pakistan and the region for the years to come. So I think I'll stop here and I'll leave the floor to another speaker. Thank you.